Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our South Dakota Farmers Market Coalition meeting this morning. Today we have John Osburn here with us from the South Dakota Department of Health. This group has talked a few times about different value-added topics and the requirements and selling them at farmers markets in South Dakota. And John is kind of going to add to our knowledge on that topic this morning, talking about guidelines for value-added products at the farmers market.
Yeah, thanks, Morgan. I hope everybody's doing good today. I'm John Osburn, like Morgan was saying, with the Department of Health. I'm located in Rapid City, and I'm going to go through a brief presentation on farmers markets, rules, regulations, for the products that you guys might be producing out there. And let me share my screen. Okay, so let me adjust a couple of things here and we'll get started. All right, so what's the purpose of our cottage laws? Basically is to provide people with an opportunity, producers mainly, to provide fresh, wholesome food products directly to the consumers located in communities throughout South Dakota. And we, as an effort to encourage and support these markets, the legislators have passed cottage laws that allows producers to sell food products to the public without the need of a food service license. So you guys are exempt from the licensing process and all the regulations that go with a food service license. So it's this presentation is kind of designed to help market managers, vendors, other home processors understand those laws because they do change from time to time, and the requirements pertaining to food items sold from a home, farmer's market, or temporary sales venue. It's important to note that all vendors are required to produce safe, wholesome food products in a sanitary manner, whether licensed or not. So you still have some legal obligations, and of course there's liability issues to produce food in a safe and wholesome manner. So there are still laws that would impact the home processor. So if there's some key takeaways from the presentation that I'd like to get through, it's a couple things. One, the laws currently, they don't provide an exemption for all homemade food products. There's only specific food products that are covered under the laws. So you're not exempt from everything just because it's being made at your home. And then the second thing is the cottage laws, they place limits on where and how the approved food products can be sold, delivered, or distributed. And we can get into that a little bit later, but basically the laws are designed for entry-level home processors to start getting their products out there to the public with minimal regulation. But they feel that once you start doing it more as a commercial food service business, then you're going to fall under regulation. So as soon as you start selling your food not at your home or not direct in person, if you start to wholesale your food, then that's when you're required to come under the state laws for regular food service licensing. All right, so just a quick refresher. So we've had this regulation, this 34/1834, for a long time. This is the one about fruits and vegetables. So any whole fruits or vegetables, they can be sold as long as you're not slicing them or portioning them or processing them in any way. Those whole fruits and vegetables, they can be sold, at a farmer's market, at a roadside stand. They can even be sold directly to the retail establishments. So you can sell whole uncut fruits and vegetables to a restaurant or a Walmart or a grocery store. There's no regulation on that. So if you have a good product and, after the initial harvest cut, of course, then you can sell that whole intact fruit or vegetable, again, at any retail establishment or out of your home or farmer's market. Okay, and then there's a few other food items that you can also sell. These you can't sell these anywhere. These are foods that are exempt from licensing, um, but they have other regulations. So like a non-temperature controlled food, like for example, a baked good is one example. But you can also do home canned foods, or basically any food product prepared at the residence and that's authorized under 34/1836, which we'll get into shortly here. All right, so let's talk about the non-temp controlled foods and baked goods. So these items that I've got listed here on this slide, and we'll provide this slide deck to Morgan here at the end, but basically any nuts, grains, if you're going to roll some oats or crack some corn, with minimal processing, um, or seeds, if you're going to do seeds or dry mixes, say you're getting ingredients or um, some spices and you want to make a seasoning mix, your own seasoning mix and package that, you can do that without any regulatory oversight. Same with baked goods, um, cookies, rolls, cakes, muffins, breads, those types of foods, those are covered under the cottage law. So those foods you can also sell through a farmer's market or your home, um, and not have any licensing requirements placed on you. This isn't a comprehensive list. I do have another list I'll share with Morgan later that you can pass out to people. And at the end of the presentation, I'll kind of go over it. But there's a little bit longer list of food items that I can share with the group. But basically, any non-temp controlled foods are allowed to be processed and sold from one's residence or temporary venue without requiring a food license. And they're also not required to take the state certified online training course known as the South Dakota Cottage Home Processing Food Safety course. And that's available through the SDSU extension. And I'll talk a little bit more about that course in a couple slides from now. All right, so this is kind of new. We do now also allow, or the state does allow, some temperature controlled baked goods, frozen foods. This is a change that we used to not allow those products that needed temperature control, like a example that's shown here, like a pumpkin pie. Now the home processor can provide those types of foods, provided that they're maintained under a temperature of 41 degrees or less. So this includes some fermented foods, some baked goods, the pies, kuchens, custards, cream-filled goods, cheesecakes, cream-filled donuts. Those are allowed, and you are required in these types of foods to take the state certified course through SDSU extension. And again, these types of foods, these cheesecakes or pestos, sauces, anything that needs to be temperature controlled like that, including soft pies, those would be, and you just have to maintain a temperature of 41 degrees or less. And that's from the time that you prepare it to the time that it's turned over to the consumer. Yeah, the processor is required to complete the online training before the food's allowed to be processed and sold out of the residence or temporary venue. And the training is required to be done on an individual basis. And it just has to be one person. So if you have like a family that's involved in the process, as long as at least one of you is taking the course, we're good. All right, the canned goods. This allows foods that are 4.6 pH or have a water activity of less than 0.85 to be sold from a residence or temporary venue. So that hasn't changed. You are required to take the certified home processing food safety course, or you can also have your products verified and your recipe and the actual product itself, you can have that tested. And SDSU Extension does that. Most of you are familiar with Curtis Braun. He does he's our third party processing expert. He's a food scientist, and he can test that product for you. I don't believe he charges a fee. Of course, there's the shipping cost for the processor, but I still think it's correct that if what I'm remembering is that he doesn't charge for the testing. So we always recommend that you do get your products tested, but again, you do have an avenue to just do the home processing course and bypass the testing. So that's an option that's been provided for the general public. Cost of the online training is about $40 and lasts for 5 years from the date of completion. I took it when it first came out. It takes probably an hour, maybe hour and a half to go through all the slides and everything. And I believe, if I'm remembering, there's like a quiz at the end of each one, but it's not difficult at all. But it just covers the basic canning principles, pH testing and stuff like that. So it just covers the basics of canning. All right, label requirements. Name of the product, name of the producer, your address, the mailing address of the producer if they're different, phone number, the date that the product was processed or made, and then a simple ingredient statement. You don't have to have a nutritional statement, just a simple ingredient from most used to least used in the recipe. And again, if it needs to be refrigerated, then you should have a note on there or directive on the label to, it says keep refrigerated, just as a reminder to the consumer that they should have that. And then there should be a disclaimer on there that this product wasn't produced in a commercial kitchen, and it may contain allergens. So that statement is also required by law to be on your label. Yeah, it's a good idea to keep the date on there. That way, if you do have to pull any product, you can go by a specific date or lot code, some way so that you can identify the product if it has to be removed from consumption. All right, and let's go to the methods of sale and delivery for those products. Again, the state law requires that all sales are in person. So you can't, leave your products at a certain place. They should be done in person. They should come to your home and pick up the product. The sale should be done in person for the sale transaction and delivery. Have to be in your physical presence. You can deliver it from personal delivery if you want to do that. But again, you can't just like drop it off somewhere or leave it at a store and have somebody else pick it up. It should be delivered directly to that person. Again, you can sell that at your primary residence, farmer's market, roadside stand, other temporary venue. There's a lot of shows or events that go on in the summer. If the town has a celebration that you're going to, and you want to sell your product at the town celebration, you can go ahead and do that. That's a limited type of celebration, or a fair or something like that. Those limited venues, those would qualify as a limited venue. So what wouldn't qualify is just I'm trying to think of some venues, but if it's like sometimes there's indoor farmers markets or whatever, where it's almost set up as a retail shop. Those can get kind of tricky and complicated. So it's kind of a case by case basis. But if you're a year-round farmers market indoor type situation, and it's open, 9 to 5 every day of the year. That's not what the law was intended for. The law was intended for, again, producers just selling their products seasonally, limited periods of time, just to kind of get the home processor kind of introduced to the world of food service. And if they want to sell their products more frequently or on a larger scale, then you just need to comply with the food service rules and regulations. So you'd have to be licensed. So that's kind of the intent of the regulations anyway. So what's not allowed is selling out of a store or a restaurant or coffee shops. Some of those situations. Internet sales aren't allowed. Again, it has to be direct in person. So you don't want to be shipping your products across state lines or anything. And we don't want you to set up your home so that people are coming there to consume the pie that you just made for them, even though, that's more of a food service type situation where it's immediate service of food, and then you're infringing on the licensed facilities that are providing a space for people. So no on-site consumption of the food is one of the regulations. All right, so a little bit on the processing authority and approved safety course. Again, this was done by SDSU Extension, so we were lucky to have Curtis put that program together. Again, he's our third-party processing authority in South Dakota. We do have another lady out of Nebraska that can, if you send her products, she can also. They're very familiar with home processed foods, and they can do some testing for you as well. And this is the information that Curtis requests the products be sent to, and I'll provide a copy of this deck to Morgan for distribution. But he just wants a small jar basically of the product, and then that's all he needs to do a good pH and a good water activity test to verify your product specs. And then he'll review your recipe, and if he has any suggestions, then he'll work with you on that as well. Yeah, the cost is free, is from everything I'm remembering with Curtis, and the turnaround time is pretty quick. And then there's a link for that information, and you can go ahead and get that done. And again, it's good for 5 years. All right, so some products not covered by the cottage law. So any canned goods with a pH of greater than 4.6 or the water activity of greater than 0.85. And examples would include your low acid foods such as peas, beans, corns, certain types of tomatoes. Tomatoes are kind of right at that 4.6. Some of them are anyway. It depends on the type. Squash, soups, meats, nut butters, variety of products. Yeah, you shouldn't be packaging chicken noodle soup and canning that. That's okay for your home use, but if you get into some of those more complicated processes, then there's a lot of retort rules and regulations that come into play, FDA requirements that come into play if you get more complicated. And so that's kind of goes above and beyond what the cottage law was intended for. So if you're cutting up fruit or produce or sprouts, anything like that, if you're planning to do that, then you need a license for that. Juices, ciders, all that type of process requires some oversight, regulatory oversight. If you get into juices,
I'm in class. I can't talk to you right now.
So, so if you have juices, you might need, some people like to do a pressed juice, cider, something like that. There are rules and regulations on that as well. So, yeah, typically the farmers market will not, or the cottage laws don't allow for juices and ciders to be served without a license. Take and bake products, those would include the doughs, so anything unbaked, like a pizza or a cookie dough or something like that, then you're going to need a license for that. And then, of course, prepared foods. So if you're making sandwiches, if you're making casseroles, hot dishes, stews, smoothies, a lot of drinks, if you want to make a smoothie is a big one, but a lot of those drinks, they require what we call preparation. And typically, anytime you prepare food, for immediate service or consumption, then you're going to need a food service license. All right, so what happens when you have a farmer's market and there might be a temporary food vendor or a nonprofit that shows up and they want to provide their products to the, at the event or at the farmer's market or whatever temporary event is, then they need to be licensed. So we do have a licensing process for temporary food vendors, and there's a checklist that they have to go through to verify that they're meeting all the standard requirements. So they would need a temporary hand wash station, a 3-compartment sink operation, those can be 3 tubs, wash, rinse, sanitize tubs. So I guess my point on this slide is that, yes, there is a process for people to follow if they want to provide food at a temporary event or a farmer's market. This would also include drinks, coffees. We license coffees because they use dairy products a lot of times, creamers. So anytime, again, people are preparing food on site, then you're typically going to need a license. And those are usually $38 per stand per event. Now Now, if you want to do like free samples at your farmer's market, that's okay. There is a process to allow for, so say, for example, that you're doing your own sausage or whatever, and you want to, which that's covered under the Animal Industry Board, but say you get approval to do a sausage and you want to cook up a little samples of your sausage and allow the public to consume some, that's fine. There's a process for that. You'd want to like a temporary hand wash sink if you're preparing it on site there, so that you could wash your hands and then glove up if you needed to. So that's allowed without a license. But basically, anytime you go beyond that, then you're going to need at least a temporary food service license. But a lot of times you're actually going to need a mobile food service license if you're doing some of those events, because there's also a rule or a state statute. The definition of a temporary event is like a fair or a carnival or it's kind of a specific event. So it can't be, well, I want to set up a hamburger stand on my property, or I want to set up a hamburger stand at the farmer's market and do hamburgers. Well, that's not covered under the definition of a temporary venue or temporary event. So again, an event is like a carnival or a fair or a town celebration or something more specific. It just can't be, hey, I just decided I wanted to do this, and so we would have to evaluate what the event is and to allow a temporary food vendor. But if you had a mobile food service license, then you can do any event, anywhere, anytime. Then you're covered under basically all circumstances. So again, temporary food vending licensing is just for a one-time event like a fair or a carnival. All right, so other foods, I kind of mentioned sausages or something, but if you're getting into sausages, then you have to contact the Animal Industry Board. If you get into honey, the ag program or the apiary program at the Department of Ag can assist you. And basically you just have to, it's basically just a simple registration. So it's not hard to follow that regulation at all. But if you're doing milk, cheese, yogurts, anything with a dairy product, you need to go through the Department of Ag with their dairy program managers. They'll get you situated correctly. Eggs would also be the Department of Ag. And again, any retail foods, then our office can help you with the Department of Health. So if you're thinking about a mobile unit or a commercial kitchen, then you can contact us to help you get started. All right, I do have a slide here, just as a courtesy to the Department of Public Safety. You know, they require that if you do sell anything, any products at a farmer's market by weight, then you should have a scale that is accurate for everybody's benefit. And they do tag those scales. They certify those scales. So Department of Public Safety would be the people that would get your scale certified. Again, if you just sell by account, you know, if you sell like 3 ears of corn for $1 or whatever, then that's not something that has to be weighed, or you're not selling by weight, so you wouldn't need to have your scale certified. All right, and so we do have several people throughout the state that can come out and assist you if you do have a question, or if you want to become licensed. If you know, we do have processors, home processors that want to take that next step, and they can actually license their kitchen at home. It can't be the same kitchen that you know, it can't be your domestic kitchen that you use to feed your family, but a lot of people have set up a separate kitchen in an outbuilding or their basement or somewhere on their property where they've, you know, maybe their garage, they've portioned off a part of their garage and made a separate kitchen just for their home processed goods. So you can have it on your property, a licensed kitchen on your property. It just can't be, again, the same kitchen that you use for the family to cook your regular meals. And that's because there has to be some separation. So yeah, we do send inspectors out to check out situations where if you want to take that next step. And I've got their contact information listed here. But can't remember what else I was going to say about this, but yeah, we're willing to help and try to get you, you know, our goal is to help you guys succeed in getting your business up and running, and we'll try to make it as smooth as possible. We do allow some exemptions on some of the requirements for, you know, if you're going to set up a kitchen at your home, if it's just processing foods and you have your products tested and you've been through the training course, then we don't make you, you're exempt from the requirement that you have to do the ServSafe certification. You know, that's more of a retail food type situation where you have to have somebody certified through that course, and that's about $150 depending on how you take it and what business you take it through. But so we kind of eliminate that requirement if you've had your products tested or gone through the other certification course through SDSU Extension. Other avenues that people have tried to start a business, food service business, are sometimes there's kitchens that are available in your community that already meet the code standards. You know, like a senior citizens kitchen or a church kitchen. Some of those kitchens, again, they already meet the code, and if you partner up with a licensed kitchen already, they might allow you time. You know, they might make an agreement with you to allow you time and space to get your products canned or whatever it might be, so that you can operate out of a licensed kitchen. And then we would just have you get your own license under that other person's, or you know, that licensed restaurant, for example. We would get another license under your name so that there's no conflicts there, basically. So whatever you're doing doesn't impact the license holder of the restaurant. So, so yeah, we do try to work with people to get their operations going. And this is the handout that I was kind of talking about, and I'll provide a copy to Morgan and have her distribute it to the group. But it just kind of covers a lot of the information. It's a one page, or it's 2 pages, but it's one handout basically, front and back, and it covers a lot of the products. You know, what's required for a state license, what is the labeling required, and a lot of examples of the foods that are allowed under the cottage law. And then it goes through again a lot of this information in a more condensed form, kind of what I just went through. But all right, so that is kind of my presentation. You know, I do have a little bit of time for any questions or whatever that you guys might have, but yeah, we try to be consistent with our with our messages to the entire state. So some of you might have seen the presentation earlier, but yeah, the other thing I was going to say is, yeah, that a lot of situations are different. We're always trying to help people succeed. It's a lightly regulated industry, the cottage food industry. We have, you saw the list. We only have about 4 people in the whole state, so we are not able to regulate it really tightly. So we don't get out to farmers markets a lot. It's more of a complaint type basis that we might intercede on a specific issue with a farmers market group or something. But it's kind of a self-policing industry. There is a little bit of oversight, but it's not heavy-handed at all. Some people want it to be more because they're upset if somebody's following the rules and somebody isn't following in the rules. It's just very difficult for us being such a small office, and we do have 6,000 establishments that are licensed in the state that we regulate. So again, we don't have a lot of resources to draw on, but we will try to help and assist when we can help out and have people follow the rules as provided by the state. So yeah, I think the biggest issue that I see is not a lot, but there are some places in the state where people just want to sell their products and they don't understand the rules, and so they'll sell their home processed products maybe at a store or a local gas station or something like that. But again, as soon as you sell your products indirectly or try to sell them indirectly, then you do need to be licensed. So does it happen out there? Yes, it does happen. We do try to contact the processor and let them know what the rules are, that they have to sell their products in person or from their home and not at a retail venue. But that's kind of the biggest complaint, I guess, that we've had since the time I've been doing this anyway, so which is almost 20 years. So but yeah, the rules, they kind of change. That we haven't had a rule change since 2022, so it's been a few years. But yeah, every so often a group will come to the legislators and ask them to revisit a few things, and so we're here to carry out whatever the state rules and regulations are. So hopefully that made sense. I just kind of breezed through a few things, but yeah, I guess we can open it up to questions.
Great, thank you. Kirsten, I think you had your hand up first, so I'll let you ask your question. And then we've got a few in the chat too.
I have two questions. One, when you're talking about the safety of juice, does that include like actually, I'm assuming like squeezed fruits, but if we're talking about like a powdered, you know, the country cottage lemonade powdered mixed with water, does that count as juice as well?
No,
Okay.
so those types of powdered, like a powdered country time lemonade or something like that, or even a powdered, there's some other powdered drinks out there that, like a sports drink or something. There's a lot of vitamin drinks out there that are just in powder form, and so we would not regulate that. Even a protein drink, if it's powdered, we're not going to impose any regulation on somebody that's doing something like that.
Okay, and thank you for that. And my second question is we've had a number of like nonprofit folks who have wanted to have a booth where they are selling something like soup that they made or making hot donuts with a little fryer. So that would still need to go through you guys to get licensing, but as a nonprofit, I think they just don't pay the licensing fee. Is that correct?
Yep, that's
Okay.
correct. So, yeah, so they still have to follow the rules and regulations of a temporary food vendor, and
Including getting licensed.
yeah, yep. So we'd
Okay.
want them to obtain a license. Again, they're exempt from the fee, but the fee only. So they're not exempt from inspections. They're not exempt from following the rules or regulations. Um, so yeah, you're correct. They would just be exempt from paying the actual fee, and they'd have to provide some documentation that they were a true nonprofit. That because there's a special tax exemption identification number that they have to provide to claim that exemption. So,
Sounds good. Thank you.
yep.
All right, we've got quite a few in the chat, so I'm going to move on to those ones. The first one is any regulations on lard or tallow products?
The lard or tallow, I'm trying to remember. I think they're exempt because that kind of is technically through Animal Industry Board. So, and from what I'm remembering on that issue, we have not required any licensing on that. So, I'm 99% sure that we've not required any licensing on those types of operations. So yeah, they would be exempt.
Okay, and then back to kind of the space for the farmers markets. If there is a space set aside in a retail location once a week for a farmers market, is that okay?
So I mean, it kind of depends on the situation. That's why I say there might be some circumstances, but generally, if you are not there selling your product directly, then it's not allowed. So you can't bring your product and place it in a retail setting, and then not be there while the product is sold. That's not allowed. But even if you are there, if you're showing up there every Monday for a year selling your product from 9 to 5, that is also probably not allowed. That would be something that we would review. But again, the law was set up to allow temporary, like seasonal venues through which you could sell your product. So if you're getting into more the retail side, then where people can go there every week, because the farmers market is typically seasonal. It's going to be open, during the summer. So if you're trying to extend beyond those seasonal type events, then that's not really what the legislators have envisioned for an exemption, basically. Because the deal is they don't want you competing with the food manufacturer that has a license, and they are trying to make a profit. They're in the business to make a profit and they're following the rules and regulations. And so, you know, it's kind of a fine line, I guess is what I'm saying. So hopefully that made sense anyway.
On the topic of kind of being present when the sales are happening, how does that work for farm side stands? Is the expectation that someone is at the roadside stand or has eyes on that for the
Yeah, I mean, the expectation is that somebody is at the stand. Again, it doesn't have to be it could be a family member. It could be, it doesn't have to be you exactly, but for whole uncut fruits and vegetables, really there's no regulation. So it's just the canned goods and the baked goods and the home processed foods. The fruits and vegetables that aren't cut are, you know, we wouldn't place really any regulation on those because they're allowed to be sold at a retail store, at a farmer's market. They're basically allowed to be sold anywhere, so anytime. So
Okay, moving on to the next question in the chat. What topics or rule changes have been the most in demand in the past 5 years? Or maybe you can elaborate on what changed during 2022.
yeah, so the changes in 2022 were just expansion of the previous cottage law. So the previous cottage law did not allow for any temperature controlled baked goods. And the new law did allow that. So as long as you maintained refrigeration. So that was a big change. It used to be just, you know, breads, cakes, cookies, you know, muffins, those types of things that didn't need any temperature control. And then in 2022, they said, hey, let's open it up to some other baked goods like the pumpkin pies and the custards and the cream filled donuts and those types of things and the kuchens and stuff. So that's been the biggest change. There's just an expansion of the products basically. So and it's kind of a, you know, that's kind of what I'm seeing is that they keep trying to get more products included under the cottage law exemption. So, you know, there might be more products in the future that are allowed. You know, some states allow a lot of products to be produced at home and sold directly to the consumer. So that's kind of where I would see this going, is that just maybe more products are going to be able to be offered from the home.
That's interesting. The next question is, could you clarify the difference between preparing foods in a USDA inspected kitchen or working with the Department of Health to obtain the necessary licensing, specifically in the context of selling prepared foods for market sales?
So I guess the USDA thing kind of threw me off a little bit because because we're kind of under the FDA rules and regulations. So I'm not sure what the USDA part was. The USDA they're more regulations, or that they kind of regulate like poultry products and you know, some of those other types of meat processing is kind of covered under USDA rules and regulations, whereas the Department of Health, they kind of cover things that are covered under the FDA. So there's the federal government has two different branches for food service regulation, USDA and FDA. And FDA is more the retail side and dairy and some other products. But so the Department of Health works more with the FDA processing side of things, the retail foods, the restaurants, cafes, again, dairy, stuff like that. But USDA is more like Animal Industry Board. So I guess that part kind of threw me off, but
James, jump in if I'm wrong, but I think what he might be asking is kind of the difference between preparing in an already certified commercial kitchen versus trying to go through the licensing yourself to be certified as a home kitchen or another kitchen for your own business. But James, jump in if I'm interpreting that wrong.
No,
I mean-
that's a correct interpretation of the question. Thank you.
So you're just wanting to know what's the difference between like a restaurant getting their license versus a home processor getting a kitchen on their property? Is that because
Yes, I think so. I think in the market context, you have so many individual producers who are wanting to bring usually home produced goods versus those who are looking at a larger operation. Maybe they're either looking at building out a commercial kitchen or using or renting a commercial kitchen. So I just wanted to make sure that DOH is the one kind of entity for oversight to bring those questions to, or if there's any overlap, even maybe with the city or what other oversight entities exist in this space to make sure that the necessary permissions are obtained for food preparation. Because it seems there's a voracious demand for prepared foods. And, as a producer, but also as someone who's looking at hosting markets in the future and overseeing markets, knowing those rules, it's pretty nuanced. And we'd like to know who's overseeing and what are the main governing bodies, make sure we understand the rules as best as possible for public safety.
Yeah, no, that's a good question. I mean, it kind of depends on the product. So it depends on what you're making or, who might be involved. And it also depends on the location. Some counties and some municipalities, they have rules and regulations that the rest of the state might not need to follow. So there's a local component as well to where the product is produced. There might be some zoning regulations or something that the state wouldn't be aware of. But typically, if you contact our office first, we can get you kind of going in the right direction. I will say that South Dakota is one of the more again non-regulatory states basically in the country. So all we have is the state food code to follow rules and regulations for prepared foods. So we don't have a robust program for food processing and food manufacturing in this state. It's never been the case where we've had a lot of food processors or manufacturers in the state. And subsequently, we don't have the rules and regulations to regulate it. Now that's changing as the smaller businesses become larger, and this will need to be addressed legislatively at some point, in my opinion. Most states they follow the food manufacturer guidelines for food service. There's a manufacturing side of food preparation, and most states address that through standards and adoption of good manufacturing practices. And so there is a lot of regulation, or more regulation, I should say, in most of the states in the country. South Dakota is not one of those states. So we are kind of in a gray area a lot of times when it comes to manufactured and processed foods in the state or in the country. So we have to do the best we can with our simple retail food, our food code book. So there might be some processes and manufactured food products that exceed what we are able to regulate. And in that case, we call on the FDA to assist us with regulations or oversight. But everybody knows the FDA is also overworked. They're limited resources also. So it's a good question. It's a difficult. There's not a one size fits all type solution. So it does get tricky again, depending on what you're planning to manufacture. Again, we try to do the best we can with the limited rules and regulations. So we'll at least try to get you licensed according to our codes, that you're following the basic sanitation requirements. But it's not, in my opinion, as adequate, or as it's not what's needed basically in our state for proper food safety regulation. Again, they're more buttoned up in a lot of the other states, but
That makes total sense. Thank you for clarifying. And then I
Yeah.
guess just one follow-up to my
Mhm.
question about what's in demand, what are people wanting to see changed? What is the regulatory process to amend exemptions? Uh, i- I'm connected with a number of other producers who do want to see the cottage food permissions widened. Um, and I mean, that's natural, especially in this digital age where home producers are really being forward in, say, Facebook communities and online communities, sharing about their foods and the things they're making. And it seems that, like I said, there's just a voracious demand for people to sell direct to consumer from home produced kitchens. Um, and I'm not necessarily saying I'm for it or against it, but I would like to know what's the administrative process to expand permissions, um, or what would those people need to do in order to get the OH to consider those amendments?
Yeah, so it's not DOH that makes the laws and regulations. So we enforce what the rules and regulations are. So any changes come through the legislative process. So you would have to contact your state senator, your state representative, um, have a coalition, have a a group that wants to meet with those representatives and get some legislation started. They would, that's how the changes that have been made previously come up. They come up through the legislative side, and then they're voted on by the representatives in the state legislature, and that's how the laws and regulations get changed. Again, we follow the FDA, the food code that we have, that we follow, all the administrative rules. That's basically the FDA food code. So we're just enforcing kind of what the FDA has adopted over the years, and the legislators have um, approved everything that we regulate. So that, they're kind of the go-to people for changes. That makes sense.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Yep.
Could you talk a little bit about labeling requirements? In a previous presentation, we had Curtis speak, and he was talking about how they could be for like canned goods like salsas or jams. They could be like put on the packaging, potentially a handout with the product. I had wondered if like a QR code with the right information would be adequate, if a handout is adequate. And I'm just curious to hear the Department of Health's stance on that, or what type of labeling options producers have.
Yeah, so we just follow what the statute says, and the statute says that you have to have this on your label, and then it lists the requirements on the label. So we take it as what it says. There are some products, of course, that you couldn't really label, like a donut, for example. But you can provide that information to the consumer on a handout, for example. So that's been allowed. But yeah, if the product's going to leave your facility, then you have to provide, or your home, for example, or your stand at the farmer's market, then you have to either have it on the label or provide that a handout of what the product is, and what the ingredients are, and the statements, whether it requires refrigeration, or it was produced in a home kitchen and the allergens might be present. You have to get that information across. The QR code, I don't, I guess I'm not sure on that. I would have to do some digging to see if that would qualify as allowable. But yeah, otherwise we we just follow the state statute on that, which says it has to be on the product.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
Any other questions? We're wrapping up towards the end of the hour anyway, but thank you for everyone who joined, and thank you, John, for joining us and sharing about this topic. I think it was a really helpful presentation.
Okay, good. Yeah, I'm glad to hear that, and yeah, appreciate you guys' participation. And yeah, we'll try to do our best to help you guys, and I'll forward this slide deck to you, Morgan, along with the handout. Okay.
Awesome.
All right.